It's no secret that oftentimes Hollywood finds itself scrambling for original ideas, and when all else fails, they tend to go back to old ones and repackage beloved classics in the form of a remake or reimagining or reboot. It seems that no movie is safe from being remade, and sometimes, just sometimes, remakes can serve a purpose. Some stories are suitable to retell with each new generation, with updated themes and sometimes, if need be, improved special effects to tell the story. Then there are movies that should just plain be left alone, and there should be no excuse to tarnish them with an update. Here are my top 10 movies that should never be remade. Number 10. First Blood. Before Rambo became a brand name and the hugely popular, unkillable war hero that he would be known as in the sequels, there was First Blood, a fairly modest and toned-down actioner by comparison, with Sylvester Stallone playing John Rambo, a traumatized Vietnam veteran who's pushed too far by the law enforcement of a small town, who finds himself in an all-out war with the sheriff played by Brian Dennehy, using his advanced training and tactical skills to survive. It's a good story and has maybe just a little more characterization than your average Stallone action flick. But you can pretty much tell exactly how a producer's train of thought would go about remaking this. Hey, let's switch Vietnam veteran with Iraq veteran and update the story, and we'll cast that Jay Courtney guy in the Stallone role. He has muscles, right? Ugh, no thank you. It's a fine movie the way it is. It doesn't need an update, and we don't need to reboot Rambo anytime soon. Number 9. Big. This is a movie that's just begging for a remake because the concept is so simple, but given the right casting, it turns a good story into a great one. A young kid is tired of being small and seemingly unimportant, and wants all the opportunities that adulthood has to offer. So he makes a wish at a carnival attraction, he wishes he was big, and the next morning, boom, he's Tom Hanks. And it's Tom Hanks' performance that makes the movie so enchanting. This was really his breakthrough role that made the entire world fall in love with him. Not to mention he was even nominated for his first of many Oscars playing the kid in a grown-up body. So let's leave it be. It would be so tempting to remake this story because it all amounts to the right casting. But this is Tom Hanks' movie, plain and simple. And given the fact that there has been plenty of other adult and kid bodies movies before and after Big, it's really all about selling that recognizable title. But any remake of this classic would be a huge disappointment. Number 8. Gone with the Wind. 1939's Gone with the Wind is still one of the most beloved and celebrated motion pictures in the history of motion pictures, based on the equally beloved and celebrated great American novel from Margaret Mitchell, with production value that's still impressive by today's standards, that pretty much immortalized Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara and Clark Gable as Rhett Butler, playing the iconic star-crossed lovers. There's simply no need to remake this. The closest we got was a 1994 miniseries with Joanne Whaley and Timothy Dalton in the roles, based on the follow-up novel titled simply Scarlet, which was not written by Mitchell, but that didn't stop them from publishing it decades after her untimely death in the late 40s. So I think we should leave the characters alone at this point and let the film's legacy speak for itself. We've gone 70 plus years so far without a remake, and that's so far so good. Number 7. 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is a science fiction classic as only the team-up between legendary director Stanley Kubrick and science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke could offer. And it has the distinction of being one of the few Kubrick films not adapted directly from a novel, although Clarke would later go on to write quite a few sequels to the story, and one was even adapted as 2010, The Year We Make Contact, starring Roy Scheider. But this is an original work, making it all the more precious, and all the more, at least in part, Kubrick's property. Considering how strict the Kubrick estate is in retaining the rights to his works, I don't think we're at risk of this happening anytime soon, so it's safe from a CGI-laden reinterpretation that would likely have to spell out its themes for the audience. I guess the closest we've gotten so far is Interstellar. Alright. Number 6. Alien. Another sci-fi classic, Ridley Scott took a simple concept that had been seen in countless other B-movies previously of a guy in a monster suit stalking a spaceship crew and turned it into something incredibly genuine and legitimately scary. It launched Sigourney Weaver's career and made the character of Ellen Ripley an iconic hero, and in the sequels to follow, an action lead that could give the likes of Schwarzenegger and Stallone a run for their money when it comes to handling their weaponry. With sequels to follow that have been hit or miss, the franchise always seems to be flirting with entering reboot territory, but there's no way the masterful tone, suspense, and convincing acting can be replicated. And believe me, others have tried, including Scott himself, but I'd rather see 100 quasi-prequels with black goo and muscular albinos than a remake of this classic. Number 5. Die Hard. Speaking of career-launching roles, Bruce Willis left his day job of charismatic bartender far, far behind when he got his big break with Die Hard in 1988, and John McClane became a household name synonymous with kicking ass, dodging bullets, and bringing down terrorist bad guys. The original Die Hard trilogy is an epic action trifecta, even though the fourth film left much to be desired and the fifth film profoundly disappointed fans all over. I don't think we should let the franchise die and get rebooted just yet. Bruce Willis owns this role, and when you take him and John McClane out of the equation, you're stuck with a concept that's been ripped off countless times anyway, from Steven Seagal on a boat to Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx in the White House. So what's the point? There are plenty of other locations terrorists can invade, and plenty of other underdogs who can save the day, but Bruce Willis makes John McClane and Die Hard what it is, and the franchise name should stick with him until the bitter end. Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Willis. Number 4. The Exorcist. The terrifying story from William Peter Blatty's novel, adapted into the film from William Friedkin, of a young girl possessed by an evil force is simply one of the greatest and scariest horror films ever made. So scary, in fact, most of its modern marketing touts it as such, and if you search any list of scariest movies ever, more often than not, The Exorcist will be at the very top, and for good reason. So why remake it? There's no need for CGI demonic effects like we see in so many modern horror movies about possession, and no need for false jump scares, which would most likely plague a modern reimagination of the story. It's perfect the way it is, and it still holds up as scary as ever, so let's leave it be, Hollywood. Thankfully, Morgan Creek, the studio that owns the right to the film, has stated that they have no plans to ever attempt a remake. So maybe there is a God. Number 3. Back to the Future. Speaking of terrifying, remember that rumor that caught like wildfire a few years back of Justin Bieber being signed on to star in a remake of Back to the Future? I have to hold back my vomit just thinking about it. A Back to the Future remake simply wouldn't work. One of the charms of the original movie was that it combined something current and hip, like 80s culture, and combined it with the nostalgia of 50s culture. If they did a straight remake of a kid from 1985, going back to 1955, they'd totally miss the point of incorporating the current and hip part. And if they did update it to, say, a kid from 2015 going back to 1985, then it's a completely different story, so why bother other than the studio getting their greedy mitts on some easy opening weekend cash because of brand name recognition? Marty and Doc are great characters, but let's keep them in the decades they belong, which actually would include 2015, but never mind. Number 2. Jaws. Of all the movies on this list, I'd say Jaws probably has the highest risk of getting a remake. It has that title recognition that studios covet, and all the sequels we got, leeching off the success of Spielberg's hit original film, are way, way in the past, and the franchise, if you can even call it a franchise, has been milked for all it's worth. So there must be a huge temptation to go back to the source of it all and remake the original, and rake in some more mountains of cash and simultaneously make people afraid of the water again. The only problem is the studio has no idea how to handle the Jaws property. Sure, Jaws 2 had its moments, I guess, but it's a forgettable sequel, and Jaws 3D was actually originally conceived as a comedy spoof until it became the even more forgettable third sequel in the franchise. And while Jaws 4: The Revenge wasn't intended to be a comedy, but most people see it that way. So I don't trust these guys one bit in remaking it, and I hope it never happens. Could anyone really fill the shoes of Roy Scheider in his most famous role of Chief Brody? Could anyone really match the quirky charms of Richard Dreyfuss playing Hooper? And anyone who thinks they can top Robert Shaw, pitch perfect in the role of Quint, deserves to have a bite taken out of them. Stay out of the water, Hollywood. Number 1. Star Wars. The 1977 George Lucas film, worshipped by children and adults of all ages worldwide, surely needs no introduction. It surely needs no remakes either. The Star Wars franchise as a whole has always been under some criticism for its somewhat whorish marketing. Aside from thousands upon thousands of action figures alone, and pretty much any product imaginable has had the Star Wars logo slapped on it at one point or another. Cereals, bedsheets, clothes, maybe even some feminine hygiene products for all I know. One thing I have to give it credit for, though, is expanding its universe instead of going back to the drawing board and remaking it. Recasting such memorable characters like Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo would seem almost like sacrilege, and should never, ever, ever be considered. I think we're at a point now where we're pretty much safe from that. A new movie, Episode 7, is on its way, not to mention a bunch of spin-off movies now that Disney has the rights, and I'm sure the merchandising cash cow will keep delivering. So it may not happen in our lifetime, but let this serve as a warning to future generations. Let's never remake the original. 1977's A New Hope is about as perfect as a movie can be, combining the tried and true story elements of Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey and the action-adventure of classic 1940s and 50s serials. The result was something unique and still to this day, so let's hope it stays that way. And may the Force be with you all. So there it is, my top 10 movies that should never be remade. Is there a movie you feel strongly about that should never get the remake treatment? What did I miss? Leave your comment below. Thank you so much for watching today, and be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and want to see more top 10s like this in the future. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button for more videos from your pal Derek, and be sure to check out my other videos and playlists. Until next time, I'll see you later.